The Galaxy Z Fold 4 might be one of the more interesting foldable phones released as of late, but there is another foldable, or rather a flippable device that Samsung has out there, and that is this phone right here, the Galaxy Z Flip 4. Today, we're going to talk about what it's like to have owned this device for a pretty long while. So without further ado, let's get into my long-term review of the Galaxy Z Flip 4. The design of the Z Flip 4 might seem very familiar if you grew up in the days where you had to choose whether you wanted to talk on the phone or be on the internet, and that's because it's made in the image of the flip phones some of our parents still use, only more modernized for this day and age. The materials used here feel very premium, with a solid armor aluminum railing around the frame of the device, with Gorilla Glass Victus Plus protecting both the top and bottom of the device, and Gorilla Glass DX protecting the cameras that you see right here on the top. If the phone you currently own is taking up too much space in your pocket, then the Z Flip 4 is probably a device you'll want to look at. When closed, the device becomes thicker but won't take up too much vertical space, which is something I find convenient. The hinge mechanism that 100% allows this device to be a flip has a very solid feel when opening and closing the device. When opening the Flip 4 up, the hinge has a bit of tension in the beginning that eventually loosens up to allow you to open the device easier. The same feeling carries over when you close the device, and both motions end up feeling pretty good. Since we are talking about the hinge though, I should say that it is possible to open the Flip 4 one-handed, but it isn't easy, or as easy as one might think. Due to that 6.7-inch display, it's pretty big even though this phone is so compact when closed. If you are wondering about what protects that inner display, that would be Samsung's ultra-thin glass, or rather multiple pieces of ultra-thin glass. The name might make you feel a little uneasy, but I've had some pretty hard drops with this thing, and I've only ended up with this welt on the built-in screen protector. If there was anything I'd say I didn't like about the design, it would have to do more with how small the outer display here is, and how the rear cameras are also part of that outer display. I don't believe that there is much that can be done about where these cameras are positioned due to the form factor of devices like this, but at least they are covered with Gorilla Glass DX, which should withstand some drops that aren't too harsh. I also still think that sometimes the design can be a little counterproductive at times, since it can take up a little bit more time to open up the display and get going when compared to a traditional smartphone. I think this is something that can possibly be remedied by making the cover display bigger, however. Like the Z Flip 4's bigger sibling, the Fold 4, you do get two displays on this phone. One of them I just mentioned, which is the cover display, while the other is obviously the main display. The cover display is very clear and allows for a few different software functions, but I'll actually get more into that in the performance and software section of this video. This display reminds me of one of the Galaxy Watches, but fused into a phone. If there was one thing I had to say that I dislike about this display though, is that it's pretty small. I understand that it's supposed to give you information at a glance, but it feels like Samsung could have definitely made it bigger somehow. And that is something I do hope to see in the future. The main display is pretty much where the bread and butter is, and I'd say it's a mix between the three devices typically seen in the S series. The resolution of this display is closer to what you'd find on something like the Galaxy S23 and S23 Plus, while the size of the display is closer to the S23 Ultra. The resolution, of course, is higher than what you'd find on the S23 and the S23 Plus, but that was most likely to match the height of the display, which is 6.7 inches. One thing I do enjoy about this display is watching videos on it. It isn't the standard aspect ratio you'd find on a candy bar phone, but there is just something about the length of this display that makes watching videos on it feel more immersive when zooming in. Just make sure you don't zoom into anything with subtitles though, unless you want to miss the bottom half of them. You probably already know this, but this display has a crease in it. Like I've said before with the Fold 4, this crease doesn't personally bother me, and it's something you'll definitely get used to after a while, but it is something you will also notice either more or less, but this is going to be hugely dependent on what color is being displayed on the screen at the time. Aside from the crease, the only thing that stands out about this display is the front-facing camera just being a big black dot that's just there. It's not that this is anything new really, but it just sticks out to me at least, like wanting to take my soul away at any given moment. One more thing I guess I should say about this display is that you can definitely go ahead and use it in sunlight pretty comfortably. The device's performance is just as good as any other Samsung device in this day and age, and it better be, since the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 Plus here isn't really all that old. Getting anything done on this device shouldn't be an issue at all, and I've had no major issues with how it performs. Samsung has included some useful software additions here, however. The cover display on the front of the device is useful for viewing your notifications, turning on and off different kinds of hardware like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, using the widgets you'd normally find on your lock screen, and using the cameras on the phone to take selfies at the full resolution these cameras support, since they are also your rear cameras technically. If you don't mind fiddling around with downloading some apps, going through a bit of a setup, and using the cover display, then you can improve its functionality by being able to use your phone's apps on this display. You can do this the official and free way by doing it through Samsung's cover launcher or by downloading something called Fullscreen OS. I'm not going to go into either of these apps in detail, but I will show them to you here a little bit. So the general idea here is that you are able to use the applications you normally use on the main display on the cover screen here. These apps will work the same exact way as if you were to open the phone and use an app. So you can pull up something like Google Maps, Microsoft Excel even, if you want to do that on a 1.9-inch screen, or something like the web browser. Now, like I mentioned before, there are two ways you can possibly do this, using Samsung's OEM official application called Fullscreen Launcher, which is part of the Good Lock family, and you can also use an app called Fullscreen OS. However, aside from its basic functionality, it is a paid app and that will give you some extras. However, most of the times you can actually get away with just the basic functionality. At the time of making this video, I don't have a video currently out on the Samsung cover launcher. However, if you would like me to go into detail, please ask in the comments and I will definitely look into making a video about that. I do have a video on the Fullscreen OS option if that is something you'd like to find out more about though. And I'll post that up in the top right corner here. One more useful software aspect to mention is Flex Mode. This is something that's also in the Z Fold 4, but it feels more useful here because of the form factor of the Flip 4. I also feel like it's slightly easier to set up on the Flip 4 than it is on something like the Fold 4. Aside from the unique things you can do with a cover display and Flex Mode though, you'll find that there isn't much difference between using a traditional candy bar phone versus using the Flip 4. The software pretty much works the exact same way it would on any of the Galaxy S series of devices, with the addition of that Flex Mode since the screen is basically flippable or flexible or foldable, you know what I mean. It's kind of weird to see a phone without 3 rear cameras these days, especially one in Samsung's device lineup, but that is the case here with the Flip 4. Though you aren't getting a third camera here at all, I can say that these cameras aren't bad, they just aren't as versatile as what you'd expect from a Samsung phone. Pictures you take with the Flip 4 will come out as good as you'd expect for a phone that's supposed to be an entry-level device, but you won't get that 3x zoom or 10x optical zoom like you see on other devices in the S series. You're pretty much stuck with the 1x zoom and that's pretty much it. If zoom doesn't matter to you and you're okay with having cameras that aren't top of the line, then I'd say day photos have a more than acceptable quality, and these cameras do have a decent amount of dynamic range to them when shooting in scenes where the lighting isn't too harsh. Low light photos are another story though. I can't say that they're horrible, but you should expect them to be hit or miss if you don't have a lot of light. And even if you do have a lot of light, you can kind of still expect them to be hit or miss. The front-facing camera is something I mentioned before in regards to how I'm not fond of it just being there showing itself so obviously on the display, but it is a pretty good camera, at least for a front-facing camera. The pictures it takes are as good as most devices out there and are certainly better than the Fold 4's under-display camera. And that's really all I can say about that. On the 5G side of things, you'll get the speed that you expect 5G to give you at this point, which should be no surprise here. Other than that, I really don't have much to say about any of the connectivity aspects. I mean, you get your Bluetooth here, you get your NFC, of course, and we all know how those things work. Now, for those of you who are curious about the speakers on this device, I actually assume that they may not be as good because this device is so slim, but they actually have some girth to them. They're not going to be the best sounding speakers out there, but they're definitely no slouch in their own right. Just go ahead and take a listen here. The battery life on this device is actually pretty good. I'm sure that's in no small part thanks to the fact that the display used on the Flip 4 isn't in 4K resolution. Honestly, I'm not mad at that at all though, since 4K on a phone rarely brings any other benefits than being a talking point. To test out how long the battery could potentially last, I decided to do a random test where I streamed a 4K video on YouTube at half brightness until the battery was in the red zone. I started this test at about 10:45 a.m. and the battery was at 88% at the time. I checked the battery percentage at 2 random times and ultimately ended that test at 3:55 p.m., which at that point I had 8% left. Based on that rough test, I'd say you probably won't have much to worry about if you're working a normal 8-hour day, or even if you're working like a 10 or 11-hour day. You'll probably have enough battery life and even some to spare after that. Now, when it comes to charging speeds, everything here is pretty standard for a Samsung device at this point. Wireless charging for some reason is still maxed out at 15 watts, and when charging wirelessly for 15 minutes, I got back 12%. Wired charging capacity tops out at 25 watts, and when doing that, I got back 23%. All in all, to kind of summarize the battery stuff up here, I'd say that you're most likely, again, not going to have to worry about this phone dying in less than a working day, and not having a 4K display definitely is a benefit here for sure. To go ahead and wrap all of this up, the Galaxy Z Flip 4 is a decent and sometimes more than decent entry into the foldable sector. It borrows its form factor heavily from the flip phones of old, and it mostly works out here for this device. The cover display is definitely usable, but it's still pretty small, and I feel like it could have been made bigger so it's more useful overall. I also think that the cameras being a part of the top of the phone leave a lot of potential for some unexpected accidents when the phone is dropped, but really and truly, I don't think there's anything that can be done about that due to this particular form factor. The display on the Z Flip 4 may not be able to reach a 4K resolution, but that's not necessarily a bad thing since it's still more than a usable display that will be very pleasing to mostly anybody who gets this phone, unless you are one of those people who likes to pixel peep. I also like the fact that you're getting a display that is closer in size to Samsung's candy bar flagship in the S series, the Ultra series of devices. I would definitely like to see the crease in the middle of the device either completely go away or be so subtle that you can't notice it no matter what angle you're holding it at. And this is something I do hope we really see on foldables in the near future. Performance on this device will be what you expect from a Samsung phone in this day and age, and though not all of the features found on the more expensive Fold are here, at least this phone actually has some of the added utilities like flex mode and the ability to use applications on the cover display, whether you do that in the official way or in the third-party way through the cover screen OS. The cameras on this device are not going to be top of the line, but they're also not the bottom of that line either. Pictures are definitely more than usable and would be pleasing to most people, or should satisfy your eyes even without the versatility of having the 3x zoom or the 10x zoom that Samsung phones are known for. The same can be said about the front-facing cameras with their quality. The 5G antennas on this phone are as fast as it will be on any other phone in Samsung's portfolio, so don't think that just because this is the cheapest device in the foldable lineup that it'll skip out on the crazy fast internet speeds you can get once you're in an area that has them. The performance of the speakers on this device surprised me in a good way. They have a decent amount of detail to them that will allow you to hear almost all of the details in whatever you're listening to, even with a phone that has a profile this slim. Battery life on this device is something that I was actually surprised by, especially since the battery isn't the biggest, but it's good knowing that you can enjoy media and go about your daily processes without worrying about having to charge the phone constantly. I still wish that Samsung would invest some R&D into making the wireless charging speeds and wired charging speeds faster than they have been for the past 4 years on any of the Samsung devices, but at least this phone's battery is small enough so that it will top up pretty quickly when being charged. Alrighty, so that is all I have for all of you today, and I hope that this review on the Z Flip 4 was helpful to you in some way. Maybe it helped you choose whether you want to buy the phone, or maybe it helped you choose whether you want to skip over this phone. Whatever it is, I hope it was helpful. The Flip series really has come farther than the Fold series in a lot of ways, and I'm really excited to kind of see what goes on with it in the future. So with all of that being said, wherever you are in the world, have a great morning, a great afternoon, a great evening, or a great night, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching as always.